Good afternoon, everybody. This is Chris Frew with Biobuzz for episode number 56 of What's the Buzz? And I'm pleased to be joined today by Mike Steele, President and CEO of Activation Capital down in the Richmond, Virginia area. Mike, welcome to the program.
Thank you so very much. Thanks for having me, Chris.
It's my pleasure. I'm excited for our conversation today. We were talking earlier. I feel like I've been like having a Virginia like moment recently. I mean, we had Amy Adams from Northern Virginia and Joy Poliferone just last week, actually, from the Alliance for Building Better Medicines, and now we get you. So we're just all Virginia right now.
Yeah, well, those two acts are tough to follow, so hopefully I can do it justice.
Well, for everybody who's just joining in, What's the Buzz is our weekly podcast where we talk to ecosystem builders. Ecosystem builders are an important part of our bioeconomy. It takes a village to grow companies and bring medicines to market. And we think it's important to talk to the ecosystem builders that are really pulling the threads that bring these villages together and enable startups and large companies to really grow and achieve what they can. Our episodes and this year, our What's the Buzz sponsor is actually one of my favorite ecosystem builders. They actually are literally building the ecosystem. Heffron and Company. They're a mechanical and engineering contractor and services company based out of Maryland here for the past 104 years, if you can believe that. And they have been behind some of the most iconic life science facilities in the region, going back to Human Genome Sciences, which was a company and that kind of really defined Maryland as a biotech market, and of course AstraZeneca, many others, including other complex facilities such as hospitals and in healthcare. But Colin and the team over there are absolutely amazing, and all of them are truly passionate about not just building amazing buildings, but the patients that those buildings serve. So I want to give a special thank you to the whole team at Heffron for everything you do to build the ecosystems that we need to bring medicines to market. So Mike, we're going to talk today about Activation Capital and what you all are doing to really build the engine there in the Greater Richmond area. For those of us who don't, or those of our audience who aren't familiar yet with Activation Capital and yourself, do you mind telling us a little bit about what the organization's mission and role is and kind of where you sit in the ecosystem?
Sure, be glad to. So Activation Capital is both the regional life science innovation hub for Greater Richmond and is the operational arm of the Virginia Biotechnology Research Partnership Authority. So we're a state authority. We also have a 501c3. And we were established in the early 90s. Original mission was to set up the innovation district, the biotech park in downtown Richmond. Our mission hasn't really changed. Our mission is really quite simple. It's to do three things. One is to help entrepreneurs build and scale life science companies. It's to accelerate the commercialization of breakthrough technologies and strengthen the Virginia's innovation economy. So, and while the tactics that we've taken has morphed a little bit over time to setting up the park, to building the local innovation ecosystem, supporting other entrepreneurial support organizations, getting very engaged with the advanced pharmaceutical cluster in Richmond and Petersburg, and now our focus on the managing our incubation facilities, our entrepreneurship programming, and mentor and investor networks, and all the partnerships that we utilize and leverage to get Virginia to the next level.
That's fantastic. Well, it's incredible to have such a long-standing organization with an ecosystem, because having that historical elements as ecosystems grow, I think, is really important. It's been said like ecosystems grow generationally. So when you can have an organization that has kind of been part of the story, I'm sure it brings a lot of value.
Absolutely, and it's funny because when I grew up in Virginia. I'm native Virginian, but I've spent my whole career outside of Virginia practically. When I matriculated through grad school, I ended up moving to North Carolina, then Georgia, then Massachusetts outside of Boston, most recently Princeton, New Jersey. And I've always wondered, kind of why Virginia hasn't really scaled over time with everything that it has going forward. And ever since moving back, I've been eating my words with all the wonderful success stories that have been coming Virginia's way. It's a wonderful time to be a Virginian and be a part of the life science community. I mean, if you look at what I think in the last year, 12 billion in investments from the likes of AstraZeneca, Eli Lilly, Merck, that's been here for a number of years, but they're doubling down on their manufacturing. The $120 million training network to help create the jobs necessary for all these new plants coming in. Banner year in venture capital, though we face some headwinds in life sciences. I think it's like 2.9 billion in VC funding in the state of Virginia in the last year, which I think is a record. And I could go on and on. I mean, but it doesn't surprise me because we've got 6 R1 universities, 2 comprehensive cancer centers. I think VCU, which is right next door to me, and UVA, both approaching 600 million a year in research funding. So it's just a multitude of tailwinds helping to propel, and it's a great time to be here for sure.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Those are like, if you're a baseball card, I mean, that's like an all-star. It's an all-star player right there. Tell me, Mike, since you've been there at Activation Capital, what are you witnessing and what are you seeing that has been part of this wave that has happened? I mean, what are the elements and the things that have really kind of enabled Virginia to have this moment right now, and that you want people to know about?
Yeah, so I think the way to think about it, we joke internally and across the Commonwealth, is, it's a success story a decade or more in the making. And one of the terms I learned and have used ever since is zeitgeist. It's some course I took in college, and it's about, everything has its timing, right? And I think it started many years ago here, certainly in Greater Richmond, across the Commonwealth, with a group of like-minded people with a vision. And if you look at the advanced pharmaceutical cluster, Activation, I wasn't around, but Activation was pivotal in that in the early days. And it was, with, the Build Back Better money and the spotlight that COVID, it's always been drug shortages, as you well know, but I think COVID really shined a spotlight on the not only the criticality, but the vulnerability of our supply chains and what happens when they get disrupted, especially in healthcare, because it's not like you can delay those kind of things. And so Activation led a group effort to secure, I think, there was some planning grants, and then there was more planning grants, and then it was a regional challenge. We became a tech hub, which is an important, box checking exercise to be included for consideration, large grant. I think Activation Capital led, 55, 60 million in funding to help get that cluster started up. You talked about Joy. She was certainly a pivotal driver in that as well. And now the Alliance for Building Better Medicine, which didn't even exist back then, which was part of Activation Capital, is spun out to become its own entity. And so through those efforts, it's a lot of words to say, it was, 15, 20, maybe 30 plus partners came together and collaborated, kind of set their personal interests aside and said, hey, how can we focus on growing this economy? And since that time, it's really taken off. Flow Corporation, which was started by Frank Gupton, which is next door in Medicines for All, and Eric Edwards, who had founded Kaleo before that. I think Flow's received 800 plus million in funding to generate the manufacture of APIs related to these essential medicines. So those are a lot of words to say. It was a bunch of people working together to try to make things happen. And I take my hat off to them and everybody associated with it, because now, the old Collins flywheel, it's not that we're trying to be the engine that could. Now it's like, okay, how do we take that momentum, that inertia, and build upon it?
Yeah, that's a great place to be. And part of that inertia is, you mentioned Flow, you mentioned some of these, advanced pharmaceutical facilities, you mentioned Eli Lilly, but another part of that inertia really is the entrepreneurial inertia that these hubs have. So you support a lot of entrepreneurs. That's a big part of Activation Capital's mission. You just mentioned. You talk about like your support from concept to commercialization. What does that look like in practice? Like, tell us a little bit more if you can unpack that for us.
Sure. So at a very high level, we supply space. So that's one of the things we do, both office space as well as wet lab space. And we hope to be adding to that in the not too distant future to be able to talk about that publicly. And then to your point, we talk about entrepreneurial programming. So we have a series of programs ranging from Basecamp, which is really where you have a researcher that's working on cutting edge kind of solutions, saying, hey, do I just want to toss any inventions that come of this over to the tech transfer and ventures office, or do I want to take an active role in bringing this to commercialization? And a lot of researchers, as smart as they are, they don't spend their careers thinking about how to start a business. And so we have, if you think about leaving on a journey or climbing Mount Everest, we have this program called Basecamp, and it's really for those. It could be undergraduates, it could be postdocs or doctoral students, or early researchers, or anyone for that matter. It says, hey, I want to learn what this is all about. What's the gauntlet you have to run to make this happen? What can I expect? And it's a pretty short course, but it lets them put a toe in the water. And then from that, we have Pathfinder, which is a pre-accelerator. So there, it's really focused consultation for researchers and clinicians, creating the milestones. What are the inflection points, especially the value inflection points that you need to put together the company, maybe even putting together the company. Following on from that, we have Frontier Biohealth, which is a standard kind of accelerator, getting folks ready to go raise dilutive financing, whether it be seed or Series A or combination thereof. And so when you look at it, it's really a continuation from the very early beginnings all the way through to getting into human clinical trials and commercialization. And we have other programs that we build around that. For example, if we find that we have a researcher, or a researcher finds out for themselves, hey, I want to be, kind of a chief science officer, or I want to be an advisor, but I don't want to handle the day-to-day. I don't want to go out raising money and writing business plans. I want to spend my time in the lab. We have a program called Pioneer Connect, where we, in such a situation, we find someone who's seasoned, who has grown and scaled a company, exited, or taking it public or whatever. And then we try to kind of do a merger of those, the researcher and this experienced entrepreneur, and together to put together a company and then advance it that way. So, and we have others. And then it's, it's investor networks, it's support organizations, both professionally and CROs. If you think of all the different steps that you have to take to get to commercialization, we want to be that entity. We're Switzerland, if you will. We don't have a vested interest. We don't take equity in the companies that we support, but we want them all to be successful, knowing that not all will, but we want to make sure that we take a measured approach to the support, and that they have the research, the resources, the assets, the connections, the mentorship, the support system they need to take things to the next level, and to ultimately commercialize their inventions.
Yeah, so you're creating like a ladder, like coming, kind of like a ladder coming out for each of these different important phases of an entrepreneurial or commercialization journey.
Absolutely. Yeah. We use metaphors like ladders, bridges, if you will, but it all means the same thing: is trying to connect all the dots necessary to have success. It's an old saying that was beat into me in my early career: success occurs when preparation meets opportunity. So it's one I've loved my whole career, and I think you have to put those conditions in place for it to have success, the right recipe. If you skip steps or you're missing ingredients, the cake doesn't taste so good when you get done with it.
Yeah. I've tasted some cake in the past that you can definitely tell. I got to know a lot of what you do through the Pioneer program. We worked with you on that.
Sure.
And something I thought was really innovative about that approach. So we worked with it to help build some of those executives to connect with companies. But what I like that what you're doing is you're not looking at like what does Boston do or like, right? So your team was really looking at like what are the assets we have, and you got great assets, and like what are the assets we don't have, and then you're like, how do we fill those gaps? So from the Pioneer program, what I just thought was really innovative is you're like, here's 10 technologies that I think are coming out of VCU. And when we worked with their team, they're like, look, we know that Richmond's not the largest biotech and life sciences market, so let's just get people all around the region from wherever else we can that have exited companies, raised capital, and start telling the Richmond story and getting people interested. And so it was kind of like, it was just like almost like not just a recruitment campaign when we were working with you guys on it, but it was like a like Visit Richmond campaign too. It was like, because you're selling, part of what you're selling is not just really great companies, but you're selling part of an ecosystem, a way of life, community. And I want to commend you. And I think that was a very creative approach to kind of fill in that executive leadership gap.
No, I think you're right, and from my perspective, we did the first Frontier Biohealth. I think was the first thing that we did in the fall, late 24, early 25, again before I joined. And after that, we were debriefing on that, and when we started recruiting for the next cohort, if you will. We've kind of got two philosophies. One is you meet people where they are. So that gets you to your point. And one of the things that we found is that we had picked some of the low hanging fruit. So we had to start reaching back into the university system. And we saw, hey, we have some great cutting edge technology and researchers, but they maybe don't have the right skill sets to take it to the next level. And so I think, having lived in Boston and North Carolina and others, they're all unique situations. It would be nice to have, the history of Boston and success of Boston, but they're in a different place, different set of needs. Their needs, it's not that they don't have needs, they're just different needs than what we have. And so we identified this as a friction point, and that's our job is, remove friction points, solve problems. And so when you come up with a challenge like that, you do that. And, I could say in the same breath, I mean, we have 5 Biohubs around Virginia, of which we're one. And yes, we're a state authority. We work on some other initiatives as well. But, we all, Northern Virginia, Amy Adams, you were talking about, and Nikki Hastings in Charlottesville, Aaron Bertram down in Roanoke. And then we've got Heather and Kevin, Leslie at ODU, and Heather with Hampton Roads, the Biomedical Consortium. And while we're all different, we're seeking to, in terms of different needs and maybe different, pieces that they have to focus on, but increasingly we're a coordinated network. And I think, of all the places that I've lived, and and I've been envious, at times of what we had in a North Carolina or Boston, but they have many more years of trying to perfect this. And I think that we're coming out swinging and saying, "Hey, we want to break the mold, not just become somebody else's mold." And I think that's one of the things that we're doing, and we're using all the unique attributes that we have and the key assets that we have to do that. And I think if we have one superpower, it's collaboration, because you don't see that everywhere you go.
No, you are 100% right, Mike. You do not see that collaboration everywhere. And again, I don't know where you trace that back to, if it's the Commonwealth kind of philosophy of Virginia, or Southern charm, or whatever that secret sauce comes at, whatever your origin story to that superpower came from. I can attest to that too. I mean, you really do see it in action in Virginia, amongst those different hubs. There's a tremendous amount of collaboration and kind of cheering for one another that sometimes you don't see in other states.
Yeah, I mean, and it's partly you compete for the same resources, but I assembled all the Greater Richmond economic development groups. And of course, they, like many groups, they want everything to land in their backyard. But as I remind people, 100% of nothing is also nothing. So, you have to kind of, you don't ignore friction points when it comes to can't get the word out, territoriality, if I'm saying that correct. You can't just ignore it. You have to recognize it and manage. It's a friction point you have to manage, and you concentrate on the things that you can do together. And hey, what are the common things that we all face, and focus on that, and then give a helping hand with the things. Oh, I faced that 2 years ago. Here's some ideas for you. And if you pay it forward that way. If you help enough other people get what they want, you'll ultimately get what you want. So that's another good adage to live by as well.
There we go. We're getting a lot of them today from you, Mike.
I'm full of the colloquialisms, as it were.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I'm sure you were all together in bio this past week, right? I'm sure there was a good Virginia representation there. Can you tell us some of the things that you were working on out there? You had a lot of the companies and business development people all in one place, investors. What were some of the goals you had, for Activation Capital and the Commonwealth this past week in bio?
Sure. Well, it's a great question. So bio, for me, I've been to bio many times in the past, especially early in my career when I was focused in the therapeutic space. It's kind of a therapeutics focused meeting, if as you will. Kind of the mid-years we were talking before the call. JP Morgan in January, and this kind of mid-year. And so I really didn't know what to expect, because I'm a 30-year industry guy. I've been in therapeutics, diagnostics, research tools, kind of covered the whole gamut. And when I went to bio before, it was always either acquiring or selling assets, therapeutic candidates, or selling into big pharma. And so, I'm not doing that here. And so we had two or three primary missions, and it was a little gray for me going forward. One is we wanted to give our incubator companies exposure. So companies that are raising money or getting ready to raise money, we worked really hard to try to get them connected to partners. And partners could be investors, partners could be therapeutics company, diagnostics company, med device companies. And I'm going to get the full debrief, but I know that we had a lot of meetings set up, and a lot of our companies are early stage, preclinical. And so I was a little concerned about that, thinking that, therapeutics companies or commercialized companies wouldn't want to reach quite that far back into the pipeline. But they took meetings, and we have research discovery kinds of technologies in our incubator and our network. So I was real pleased. I'm waiting to see the follow-up for that, but that was certainly one. And then the other was connecting with investors. We have a dearth of seed and angel organized groups throughout Virginia, being early stage life science, even though we have a lot of success overall. So we wanted to expand that network, and my colleagues, especially Nikolai, who I think did a really good job of doing that. And then thirdly, just to get a flavor for the ecosystem. And we were talking before the call with the Biohealth Capital Region. Rich Bendis was chairing a panel at a breakfast meeting, invited myself and others from Blackbird and Tedco to be on the panel. That was my first time meeting any of those people. And so it was great just having that kind of networking exposure. And then, as you well know from whenever you attend the conferences, I didn't even attend a single session, because once you meet one person, they go, oh, you should meet this person, or hey, have you thought about this? And so it becomes, when we were kids, the old Prel commercial, and they tell a friend, and so on for the shampoo commercial. It's the same kind of thing. And so it ended up being a great time well spent. And I didn't know going into it what it would be like, because I'm seeing it and pursuing it from a different lens, but it ended up being a great opportunity.
That's great. Well, you mentioned some of the startups that you're supporting. It is tough when you're in that preclinical getting meetings. So, that's the capital market is still like one of the top concerns of every company. Like, will I have capital to get there. I'm curious, did you have any sentiment coming out of some of those investor meetings? Do they have, you see money more activated, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. So, I mean, we talk about the valley of death in life sciences and from a funding perspective. And so historically, I can remember early in my career, I can't remember which Bush it was, but, NIH extramural research, SBIR and STTR and all that, it went from like 13 billion to 26 billion. And that was a great time to be in life sciences. And we happened to be doing a roll-up strategy in the research market. So it was a poignant time for my company at the time and created a lot of tailwinds for us. But more recently, with all the kind of discombobulation and all the stuff, NIH not getting funded, SBBR, and all that, that's been a challenge. And increasingly, the risk profile for companies and investors has shifted to the right. And I think it's for a couple of reasons. One is, anything AI, that's the hot ticket. So people, some of the monies that were in life sciences maybe got shifted to other verticals with shorter timelines. And so, what people have to understand is, I guess, a couple things. One is patience, because investing in life sciences is wonderful. It's an evergreen, because once you get commercialization, it tends to be in place for a long period of time. Once you attract manufacturing, it tends to be in place. So it's all kinds of reasons to be excited about life sciences. But at the same time, funding this valley of death has become even increasingly more difficult. And so I think, we as entrepreneurs and support system folks, we need to listen to investors because the dynamic has changed. And so understand what it is that they're looking for to be able to write those checks. And then we as ecosystem providers, we have to figure out, hey, what do we have to do? What do we have to change? How do we change our models to prepare our companies to be in a position to deliver on those things that the VC community and partners at pharma or at whatever stage they're willing to invest? It's our jobs to prepare those companies and help them climb that ladder and get over that bridge in order to do it. So that's what I take away from it. And so there's no real epiphanies. I think we all that work in this every day kind of get it. And now it's thinking about, what do we have to do? For example, but long before I got here, we used to have a fund within Activation Capital. Do we need to work on putting that fund back together to create local capital, be in and able to invest in not only Greater Richmond but Virginia companies? So that's that, and a myriad of other opportunities we're looking at, so that we can be better custodians, if you will, of being able to get these companies through, because that's what we're ultimately trying to do, is get them to matriculate through and towards success.
Yeah, that shift to the right has been a big impact on a lot of companies and staying afloat and keeping their runway going. But I do think the programs and investors aren't just investing in technology, right? They're investing in, can this company operationalize? Can they move it forward? And having a good ecosystem and having trust that, if I invest in a company in Richmond, I can see this company growing. So I'm sure that was part of it too, really kind of building that trust that there's that you put your money here, we're going to make this company succeed.
Absolutely, and we point to our success stories. I mean, we've got a company that is approaching regulatory approval, that's matriculating out of our space because they need larger CGMP manufacturing space now that they're finish up their clinicals. And so we love that. We want them to graduate. We want them to continue to grow, because that creates opportunities coming in behind them for the next new company to start and go down the same pathway. So we want to create this machine, this engine, if you will, that attracts, cultivates, and then spits out great technology and teams. Because as you know, in all parts of your business, money chases talent, it chases technology, and it looks for ripe soil. It's like I grew up on a farm in Southern Virginia. You can take the best seed, the best care, but if it's not the right soil, if you will, in the right environment, it's hard to have success there as well. So we try to put all those three things together here.
Yeah, I like that analogy, having the right soil for it to grow. It's a really good analogy to bring in. We had a I know we're almost at time here, but we had a question come in from LinkedIn from Shalyn Dave from Connor Strong and Buccaloo. And he said, but partnerships between industry and the public office in Virginia seems to be one of the other things that have helped to move things along fast in Virginia. Any insights into how other regions can learn from the success you've had?
Yeah, so I mean, I think in terms of industry, because I'm not a government or academic, by training, and so I start with the end in mind, and pretty much everything I do. And one of it is what are the friction points in the marketplace, and the closest people. Well, there's a number of groups that are close to it. One are clinicians, but also commercial companies that are serving that. They hear firsthand, and so we try to work on it each. We're blessed, being next door to VCU. It's they're approaching 600 million in revenue. Got a comprehensive cancer center, medicines for all these great assets, and all that, and VCU Health, their sister organization. So we have that feedback loop. But you take what the problems are, then you go come up with solutions for those problems, and then you get them to commercial, and then you use the partnerships that you have in industry. That's a feedback loop. So every commercial entity that I talk to, whether it's Lenovo, who just bought a plant down in South Richmond. I was at a CEO dinner with their site head, or Halion, or whomever. Every discussion I have, I try to get in tune with their innovation pipeline. What are you looking for? So that then we can help connect the dots to VCU and Virginia State and Union, University of Richmond, all these great universities we have around us, and then align that with the researchers and the research program, so that we become an engine for them. And yes, we're not going to, all of our technologies aren't going to stay right here in Virginia. Of course, we've got too much going on, but start local. I think in terms of concentric circles, look here, Greater Richmond, across the Commonwealth, across the region, like Biohealth Capital Region. And then you keep moving outward until you find the right partnerships and right fertile ground, if you will, to make it to the next level.
Yeah. So last question for you, Mike, before I let you get back on with your Monday. So when you and the team are sitting around and when you're talking about all the work you do, I mean, I've met almost everyone on your team. You have a passionate group that you have working with you. What's your future vision? Like, what do you hope to achieve through Activation Capital over the next 5-10 years that you all talk about, that everyone's kind of working towards that North Star?
Yeah, so for me, I can give you and I think it'll answer both. So when I came back, I wasn't looking for a job. I was looking at a way to make a difference. I read this article, and it brought back kind of memories. So I can remember when I came into grad school, I felt, and maybe it's because I didn't have the right connections, or I wasn't smart enough to know any better, but it didn't seem like, I knew I wanted a career in biotechnology, life sciences, but I didn't see, my first job came down in North Carolina, and then I went on from there. And but I spent time away from my family, and especially end of life stuff with my mom and grandparents, stuff like that. It was hard. It's like, well, gosh, wouldn't it have been great to be able to to commercialize my invention? I was never smart enough to come up with too many inventions, or practice your trade, not have to live the Commonwealth. Well, when I came back, I read an article about how many higher ed grads continue to leave the state, but it's not for all the reasons you think. It's a lot going on here now, but we have such a great training system. We have these great universities that they're in high demand everywhere. But that kind of got my goat a little bit, and so my focal point, and I thought Activation Capital, with its being an authority, being a 501c3, it was a great vehicle to be able to ensure that the next generation of whether it be entrepreneurs or professional people to either commercialize the invention or practice their craft, they'll never have to go beyond Virginia to be able to do that. And so that's my goal. And so if 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, if we've perfected the engine for the next cycle and be able to show that, hey, not only did we take a little bit of momentum that we had, but we built it and it's going faster, and we're created more jobs, more opportunities, commercialized more inventions, started more companies, then we'll be able to look back and say, you know what, we did a good thing.
That's great. Well, that's something very special we can end on there, Mike. That's a great mission to come to work every day for, and it seems like you guys are on a good track. So I'm excited about what you're doing. I know you've got some really innovative companies down there, and just again, everybody I've met, from you to Joy and everybody working in the ecosystem down there seems to all be focused on kind of helping everybody win.
No, it's great, and I appreciate the opportunity. It's part of my job is evangelizing not only what we do, but all of our colleagues across the Commonwealth. And if you've never given us a look before, do it now. Come on in, the water's fine, and it'll be a great opportunity. Thanks again for your time and having me on.
Yeah, my pleasure, Mike. Really enjoyed talking with you today. Well, thank you all for tuning in to this episode of What's the Buzz. I hope you tune back in a couple weeks. We're actually going to take next week off, but we have Mark Nardone, a really good friend of mine, who has been for the past 18 years or so been building advanced training and workshops for scientific researchers, making sure that they have the most up-to-date latest technology capabilities, everything from like single cell and 3D cell culture to the latest in CRISPR and bioinformatics. They've trained, Mike, over 20,000 scientists.
Wow.
And their instructors are, some of the top instructors in the field from National Cancer Institute and some of the top companies in the field. Really amazing organization that Mark has built, and now they're on campus at Montgomery College, believe it or not, a community college that brings people in from all around the world for these trainings. So I'm excited to talk about community building in building the ecosystem around training and advanced skills in this industry, that's the stuff that these new innovations are coming from. And I'm excited to hear some of what he has to share. So tune back in for that. And as always, follow us on LinkedIn. We have all of our episodes on YouTube. So as the kids say, make sure you hit the like and go follow us on YouTube. But if you want to catch up on any of our past guests, including Matt Tremblay, who you met out at, and Troy Stovall as well. So please do. Until then, Chris Frew with Biobuzz. Thank you so much for tuning in, and enjoy the day.
All right. Take care.
Thanks, Mike.